Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken and I'm joined by my usual co-host and colleague Brian Dick for a bit of a transfer special. We're going to look back on the week that was Birmingham City. They signed 6 players in 6 days. Pretty much sent the shivers up the championship. Brian, talk to us about it. It was a fantastic week for Birmingham City, wasn't it? 6 players in 6 days. Some very, very big names in there as well.
A bit of a transfer special. It's going to be a lot of a transfer special, isn't it? And I think had the media team not been going out to Portugal right now, they'd probably be lying down in a darkened room, wouldn't they? Because they certainly were given plenty to deal with. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you say it's really got the championship talking. Yes, the sort of sheer quantity of them, 6 in 6 days, but the quality has also been very eye-catching as well, which we'll come on to a bit. And I think we're going to try and make some sense of it, aren't we? In as much as where does it all go into a formation and how do they all get shoehorned into a formation? If we can, can't promise that at the moment. We'll maybe find out more when Blues play on, is it on Saturday they're playing their first game, isn't it? Maybe find out more then. But, the question in my mind is, are we looking at last season's 4-2-3-1 in as much as it stayed a 4-2-3-1, which we know it didn't, or are we looking at something different?
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. I think by the end of pre-season, we're going to know. I'm not sure we're going to know by the time Blues finish their first pre-season game against Sevilla on Saturday evening. But we might have more of an idea of where certain players will fit in. The 7 names so far, because it is 7, they've also signed Phil Neumann, the German defender, obviously the pre-contract. So they've got James Beedle, Tommy Doyle, Demarai Gray, Bright Asai Samuel, Kyogo Furuhashi and Kanya Fujimoto, 2 Japanese players over the weekend to cap the perfect week in terms of signings. Brian, which one are you most excited about?
Kyogo. Just the prospect of, someone with such a goal-scoring pedigree coming to Blues, and if you can just sort of airdrop that into Birmingham City and drop those goals into the Blues team, then I think that is tremendously exciting. I've kind of been glued to highlight reels of his goals for Celtic. There's all manners of finishes. His movement's really impressive. We'll come on to him in a little bit more detail. But yeah, Kyogo is the one for me that when we discuss him in greater depth, there are 1 or 2 concerns for me about Kyogo, but this is the time for hope, isn't it? This in pre-season, and I'm salivating at the prospect of Celtic's Kyogo becoming Birmingham City's Kyogo and him having the same impact. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, long gone are the days where Blues are, bottom of the barrel picking in the championship. They can get the top players in the league now, and so many of those names walk into every championship team that will be in the league next year. Kyogo is difficult to look past. I'm really excited by Tommy Doyle. Having said that, first, I'm not really sure where he's going to fit in because we know how strong Blues are in their central midfield positions. And obviously, it's very hard to look beyond that Demarai Gray deal, isn't it? He is everything that Blues needed or need going into the championship. They lack pace and athleticism in the wide areas at times last season. Only really Ethan Laird and Keshi Anderson had that consistently over the season. To have someone like Demarai Gray, a Premier League winner, someone who's played 200 games in the Premier League, is exceptional. And he's also, yes, he's getting towards the latter stage of his career, but he has only just turned 29. It's not like he's a player over the hill looking for one final contract. He said himself, these are his best years, potentially he can give them to his boyhood club. So that is massively exciting for me. And I think the key thing I've looked at, Brian, is that you look at these signings, they seem to have taken care of every issue. You've got the speed and athleticism of Gray, you've got the quality in possession of someone like Tommy Doyle, you've got the goals of Kyogo, the craft of Fujimoto, and you've also got the steel of Neumann. Blues are going to have a very well-rounded team by the looks of things.
And what you've not said there is the absolute flyer that is Bright Asai Samuel as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they do. It's probably a separate podcast in itself, isn't it? What gaps are there in the squad? Will they be looking at doing something at left back maybe with Lee Buchanan sort of probably not going to be back for half a season? What do they do with Ben Davies if they're still in for him at centre back, and if they do feel they still need another centre back and it's not Davies, who is it? But yeah, they've absolutely gone through virtually every department, haven't they, and given it not just a freshen up. They've absolutely transformed it, haven't they? Certainly in the attacking areas. And we said so often last season that the back six, the 4 and the 2, were brilliant, and you'd happily back them in the Championship. The 3 and the 1, and finding the right combinations there. Well, it's almost an embarrassment of riches now, isn't it? And the options that Chris Davies is going to have, and with those options comes expectation and pressure, which is absolutely fantastic that he's got them in for pre-season, because now he has got the time to sort of perm the right combinations, hasn't he?
That's the key, isn't it? I think last year, when you look at the team that started that first game against Reading and went through the whole of pre-season, by the end of the season, there was probably only 4 or 5, maybe 5 starters left in the strongest 11. So getting them in so early is absolutely key. There's obviously going to be a lot of work trying to get players out now, because they have very much maxed out and gone beyond the squad. They've got so many senior players, some now need to go. But yeah, just an exceptional start to the window on the face of it, and hopefully there'll be more to come as well. Brian, you've put most risky on the running order. Do you want me to kick us off there?
You can do, yeah. I suspect you're going to get there before me, but go on.
Well, I don't know. You might have something completely different, but I think the risk for me, I think, is probably the Beedle one. Just because he's still only 20 years old, not got a massive body of work, although he has had 18 months in the Championship. The others look very kind of proven, ready to go for me. Beedle creates a situation similar to last year, really, when you've got 2 goalkeepers jostling for position. In the end, Peacock Farrell won last year, but obviously that proved to be the wrong decision because he made mistakes, and Allsop came into the team and performed brilliantly. You are upsetting the apple cart a little bit by taking Allsop out of the team straight away, which you presume is going to happen because Beedle is a loan player from a Premier League club, and they rarely join Championship clubs without guarantees over minutes. So if that is the case, you need James Beedle to be very good from the start and be a reliable last line of defence. And that's pressure in itself on a 20-year-old goalkeeper.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you have stolen my answer there. I was going to go Beedle as well. We spoke to Alex Miller at the Sheffield Star regarding a few mistakes last season. And listen, he didn't pillory the lad. Everyone accepts, and I think you can even see when you watch him in the Euro under-21s, James Beedle is a very, very promising young goalkeeper. He's very comfortable with the ball at his feet. His shot stopping is good, but there is still plenty of developing to be done. And you've hit the nail on the head, which is my concern, which is just created a situation. Was that the phrase you used regarding who's number one and who's on the bench or who's the cup goalkeeper? And I find myself having this sort of philosophical debate because my instant reaction is, well, surely Ryan Allsop has done enough to retain a shirt and deserve a chance in the Championship. But then if you expand that to the wider squad, you could probably say the same of Keshi Anderson, couldn't you? But do we really expect Keshi to keep Demi out of the side? I don't know that we necessarily do. And it's this sort of speed and the level of trajectory that Blues are on. They're in a real rush. They are signing massive quality, and they've undoubtedly improved the quality of their squad. And I think that League One team did enough to deserve first shot at the Championship. I think that's largely redundant now, isn't it? Because of the speed that Tom Wagner wants the club to move at.
Yeah, and the 2 players we mentioned here, Ryan Allsop and Keshi Anderson, they both started last season out of the team, didn't they? That's key here, I think. They're clearly players who have experienced this before and have come back from it before and forced their way into the 11, and both became integral parts of that team last season. So they're probably both, hopefully, the sort who are going to say, I'll prove you wrong again, and try and force their way back into the team, and that can only be a good thing. But as you say, particularly in the case of Demarai Gray, with that kind of quality coming in, you're not expecting him to start the season on the bench, are you?
No, absolutely not. Listen, I'm going to put my cards on the table. I'm uncomfortable with the James Beedle situation. You know, I'm sceptical about this one. I really am, and I hope to be proved wrong. And I hope, if he starts the season, as I think he will, I hope that, you know, he goes and plays 46 games and ends up with the Golden Glove, and I'm left with egg on my face. But of all of these signings, it's the one I think it's just the question mark for me. It's the one that sets the spidey senses tingling a little bit.
No, I'm probably in the same boat there, Brian. To be fair, I think if it was probably a more experienced person coming in, goalkeeper coming in, who played in the Premier League and had some seasons at the top of the Championship, I thought, okay, fair enough, you consider the gap in quality there. But I don't think Beedle's necessarily done that much of the Championship that you'd say, okay, he is a deserved number one. I don't think he's that far clear of Allsop. It looks to me like quite an even battle, and I hope it does end up being that, and they battle it out over pre-season rather than it just being a case of we've signed this Premier League goalkeeper on loan. He has to play, or has to at least start the season.
Yeah, indeed. Should we move on and go on to some of the other transfers? So we've listed them here. They're in no particular order, but Phil Neumann is the first one. We talked about him quite a lot already, so it maybe won't take us that long to discuss our feelings about Neumann. But what are we saying? The prospect of 6'4" Neumann playing alongside 6'4" Christoph Clara. It's pretty tasty, isn't it? That said, I haven't seen him kick a ball in the flesh yet.
No, I was having this conversation with Joe Chapman a couple of weeks ago, and you're looking at all these kind of technicians that Blues are signing. You know, you've got Kyogo, Demarai Gray, midfield of Peck and Iwata. Even though those two are quite robust, they're still not on the larger side. They're not particularly big players. But then you get beyond that, and that's where the beasts are, isn't it? I guess you've got Neumann and Clara, 6'4" centre backs. In Neumann's case, we're led to believe he's a very athletic player as well. I've seen some of his highlight reels, spoken to Chris Davies about him. He gives off the impression that he's a fast defender who will be key next to Clara, because we know Clara's not particularly quick, and that was an area where he was exploited at times last season. So I think it's a massively exciting sign, that one. I like it. And you've mentioned, I think you put on the run order that he's played a number of games at right back as well. And it will be interesting. We're going to go on to formations in a little while. But is Chris Davies played with an inverted fullback last year, and when Blues are in possession, it became a back three. So what's to say that Neumann couldn't play at right back and Blues flip the system this year, and the left back is the guy who bombs on and becomes the left winger in possession, and you form a back three with Neumann, Clara, and potentially Christian Beedle or whoever else is that left side centre back. Yeah,
indeed. Over 100 games as a right back in his senior career. So yeah, very much so. And we will come on to whether we start with a back three, three centre halves and a couple of wing backs. That sort of that setup, which has always been used when it's been used by Blues in the past as a defensive setup. It's become a five very quickly. I don't see, if they go down that route, and I don't think they will, Neumann would fit the bill perfectly as a right outside centre back, wouldn't he? And Clara as the middle centre back, and we'll see what becomes on the left anyway. So, really, really keen to see what Neumann brings. Beedle was the next one on the agenda. What did you make of him in the 21s, Alex? Let's judge him by his last few games.
You know what? I quite liked him.
That is fair.
I liked his short passing distribution. I thought he was really good at just popping it into the midfield players. Normally, Elliot Anderson in that under 21 side, and just making an angle to get it back in case the midfield player needed to give it. I liked that about him. Less so his long balls in terms of distribution. We know that's a massive strength of Ryan Allsop. I wasn't massively convinced that was a huge strength of James Beedle. With his hands, I was quite happy. He's got a 6'7" frame. You'd probably hope that in time, as he becomes more confident, that use it a little bit more. and comes and claims corners. Now we do see a lot of goalkeepers tend to stay on the line, don't they, with corners.
Yeah.
I think that's something they are clearly taught to do these days, or a little bit more. But someone with that frame, you'd hope they'd be a little bit more commanding. But again, that's an experience thing as well, I think. I wouldn't say Ryan Allsop was massively commanding, or is massively commanding when the ball's, hoisted in from a corner or a thrown and whatever inside his area. At times he does come and claim, but I don't think it's a massive, massive strength of his. The key thing with the goalkeepers for me is Beedle that much clear of Allsop as a goalkeeper that Allsop's exceptional ability with his feet almost becomes redundant, because that's as a starting point. Ryan Allsop has that strength in his locker, and I don't think Beedle's going to get near him as far as footwork and distribution and ability to create chances is concerned. It's whether Beedle is that far clearer, that much better as a goalkeeper, I think.
It's absolutely that creating chances side of Allsop's game. It became a feature as the pitches got cut up in League One, and as teams sat deeper on Blues, it was a feature of these long raking clearances from Allsop onto Keshi Anderson's chest, or what on the opposite side with the winger making an inside run. Yet to see Beedle do that. The other thing I would say is that in the 21s, I thought he made the saves you'd expect him to make. I thought a few times the ball was pushed back into the penalty box, into a dangerous area, which, I'm not massively comfortable with. I'm not going to say that's what Lee Camp used to do, but I just like the ball pushed away from the goal more. So yeah, we've spoken about the concerns, but we've got to give the young man a chance, haven't we? Which we both will. So yeah. That's Beedle. Brings us on to Tommy Doyle. I listened to your chat with Ben Husband about this, and thought it was really interesting about the positional flexibility that Doyle brings. Obviously, central midfielder, /8/10 maybe, on loan for the season from Wolverhampton Wanderers, having come through the Man City youth setup.
Doyle is the only one I look at, and I'm not 100% sure if he fits the current system. As in, I think he's the one who could make Blues change. The 4-2-3-1 they had last season, if you're looking at Sung Ho Peck and Smokey Awata as your two sixes, obviously Peck moves slightly further forward, but as your two starting sixes, Doyle creates the conundrum, doesn't it? He is going to have to fit into one of those two slots in that formation, which probably moves Peck, whether it's further forward or whatever, I don't know. But it suggests to me that it would probably be better with a different system, because then you could fit all three of them into the same system, and the three of them are so good that I don't know which one I wouldn't play. I was having this conversation with another Wolves fan, Ryan Lester, who's also done this podcast, and saying that I'm not actually sure he gets in the starting 11, and that sounds absolutely crazy, because this is Tommy Doyle, who has been one of the best England under 21s of the last 4 or 5 years, played in the European Championships winning team himself, has won promotion with Sheffield United already, 2 seasons in the Premier League with Wolves, played 50 appearances, and I'm not sure he would be a starting player in Blues' current system.
Yeah.
But because of where he's come from, he has to be, doesn't he? Like, he has to start, he has to play a lot of games, so there's got to be a way of shoehorning him in. And I guess we're going to come on to that.
Yeah, it's a bit easier to do that with a centre mid than it is with the goalkeeper, isn't it? The lone goalkeeper is probably going to play. The lone centre mid, you can obviously use as a substitute, and you can rack up 40 appearances, 20 starts, 20 appearances off the bench, and everyone looks at that as a decently busy, active season. Doyle is something different in terms of, it's fair to say, in terms of the range of his passing. Will he become Blues' best passer of a ball, do you think?
I think I'd say he's a better passer of a ball than Awata. I'll say that. I think Awata's definitely more robust and physical, better at the if you've got one man holding the midfield together, as Blues had last season a lot of the time, Awata was just sitting in front of the back to the two centre backs. Awata was going to be better at that and putting out fires than Tommy Doyle. But as far as on the ball, I think Doyle's probably going to be better than Awata. I'm not sure whether he's better than Peck. Peck carries the ball fantastically, doesn't it? That is a real skill of his, and quite unique with central midfield players. They often don't run away from players, whereas Pep can. So probably a different type of midfield player, but someone whose skill set is largely how can we get him on the ball? How well is he going to use the ball? He's clearly got a great range of passing that probably does. Yeah, it does put him clear of at least a Wata and maybe into Peck's bracket as well.
Yeah, interesting. We started out by saying that, you know, he's kind of the wild card, and is he the hint to something tactically different to come, which we will discuss. So yeah, Tommy Doyle is a really intriguing signing. Be very interesting to see how he's used. Demarai Gray, thoughts about that? I will say I'm naturally suspicious of players going back, just naturally, and I'm not saying this is going to be the John Terrell experience, because you know, Dimmy is a next level athlete compared to Terrell, but I am also a sucker for a nice homecoming as well. So you know, I'm at both ends of the spectrum there. What do you think? I mean, I guess you nailed it when you said he's exactly what Blues need, and it makes a ton of sense, doesn't it?
I just think he fits Brian, doesn't he? I mean,
yeah.
Blues need. Keshi Anderson was excellent last season, but Keshi Anderson has never been a player that has competed at the top end of the Championship and gone to the Premier League. Demarai Gray has. He's been better than the Championship his entire career, pretty much, apart from obviously the first couple of years with Blues. So it's a high level sign. It's a very good sign on paper. Obviously, paper never always doesn't always translate to actual quality on the field. But I really like the look of it. He is everything they need in terms of profile of player for that position. Chris Davies obviously has had the benefit of working with him for about 18 months at Leicester, so you presume the relationship is quite strong there as he's come to work with him again. So it ticks a lot of boxes for me. I hope it just. I mean, speaking to Dean Holden, who coached Demarai Gray actually out in Saudi Arabia, he did mention that he was excellent to work with, excellent when we got him on the field. There were just issues at times with little niggles and knocks where we couldn't always get him onto the pitch. And you can see that from Demarai Gray's output in Saudi Arabia. He didn't always play all the games. I think he played 47 across 2 league seasons.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is the league? I think it's 34, isn't it? So, yeah, he's probably playing around 2/3 of the games, isn't he? So that's something Blues need to work on, just making sure he's available. If he's available, he's going to be a very good player. Yeah,
indeed. Yeah. I find his interview with Blues TV really interesting. You know, he made no secret of the fact, I don't think there ever was on anyway, about the fact he's a Blues fan. He said that he knew Chris Davies was a good coach, and that he sort of watched from afar as the team went down and then straight back up. And the phrase he used that sort of stuck out for me is, he said, when you play for the team you support, you have something different in your heart. Obviously, I spent a bit of time around Demarai and interviewed him a few times when he was coming through. What struck me is how grown up he is now. He speaks really well. You know, he used the phrase as himself as he's a son, a big brother, and a dad now, and you know, just exuded a maturity, I thought. He also said that Blues are going to get his peak years. I hope that's the case. I'd be pleasantly surprised if he is, you know, the flyer and that he was when he left Blues, but also with that extra experience grafted on. But you know, some of his contributions in Premier League games for Leicester and for Everton, some of the goals he scored against Man City and Manchester United are truly breathtaking, aren't they? So yeah, really exciting. I suppose the other issue is the finances, but I don't know how deep we can discuss the finances. If Blues can make it work, then yeah, go Blues. But you know, we don't have the information on the finances, so I don't even know why I'm really raising it. But yeah, the interesting one is also the shirt number for me. He came through. I think when he came through, he wore number 33.
Yeah.
When he recently vacated by Ayumu Yokoyama, so that's free.
Replacement. He's his replacement.
Upgrade. I think we can file that in the upgrade basket. I think his last season he wore number 7, which is that Emil Hansen's shirt?
Yeah.
And he wore 11 at Everton and El Ettifaq as well, which is obviously Scott Wright's shirt. I'll be interested to see what he does with his shirt number.
Are you trying to sell? You're going to have to sell Emil Hansen to give him the 7th shirt.
Let's start that rumour here. Yeah. But I mean, the likes of Scott Wright and Emil Hansen must see Dimmy and Asay Samuel arrive, and their heads must be spinning. Suddenly it's got very serious, hasn't it, for them? Yeah, well, I mean, out wide was the key area to strengthen, wasn't it? I think Hansen in particular, because he broke down 3 times with muscular injuries. That's different to Scott Wright. Scott Wright had although he had one freak calf injury that kept him out for 2 or 3 months mid-season, it was a knee injury, wasn't it, that ultimately ended his season. I feel like he's got to be given a chance to prove himself to be the effective sub that we know he can be. Hansen, because there are now 2 left wingers ahead of him in Demarai Gray and Kashi Anderson, I think it looks very difficult for him. So it wouldn't surprise me if he tried to look for a move elsewhere. Yeah, indeed. But Dimmy's role in the side is obvious, isn't it? He's the left winger. He can play on the right, and he did a few times for Blues, but he's a right-footed left winger that comes in, and we all know that. Who is next? Bright Asay Samuel. Thoughts about that one? A genuine flyer, isn't it? Absolutely. He really can. I will never forget his goal for QPR against Blues, I think in 2019. You watch so much football, and there's not actually a huge amount of athletics difference between 9 of the 11 players on the pitch. You might get a lumbering centre-back and a goalkeeper, but they're all pretty much of a muchness. But the way in 2019 Asay Samuel just absolutely torched Maxime Collin, from inside his own half. He was carrying the balls, so you'd expect Collin to be faster anyway, because he's just an outright sprint, and he absolutely started behind him, ran past him, and finished 2 or 3 yards in front of him, and stuck the ball in the net as well, over 60 yards. An absolute flyer, yeah. And Maxime Collin wasn't a terrible athlete, was he? So that's saying far from it as well. Exactly. Yeah. I quite like it, to be honest. He's had 4 years in Turkey, hasn't he? And playing at a very good level. He's played in the Champions League. He's played Europa League. He played 9 games in the Europa League last year under Jose Mourinho. Yeah, against the likes of Man United and Lyon and Athletic Bilbao. Exactly. Yeah, I think he was up against Nico Williams in the Athletic Bilbao match. You've stolen my line there. Yeah, I mean that's a battle of 2 speeds, isn't it? So I mean, it's a really, really exciting, interesting sign on paper, and we know he went to Turkey as a winger, didn't he? He played left wing for QPR. He played right wing for QPR. He's come back as a right back. They've transformed him into a full back. He plays right back for Nigeria as well. He's got over 20 caps internationally, and he fits the profile of right back we know that Blues like currently, based on Chris Davies' first year of work. Bright Asay Samuel fits it to a T, doesn't he? He's perfect for it. As a right back who wants to largely get forward, play on the defensive line of the opposition, and ultimately get involved in 1v1s and take players on and get to the bar and put crosses in. Exactly the same as Ethan Laird will play the position. So that looks like one hell of a battle, because second half of last season, Ethan Laird was exceptional, and we know he's a high-level athlete who has the ability to go to the Premier League. Do you think Asay Samuel has been brought in as a right back? Bearing in mind, we've just been sitting here saying that Phil Neumann could potentially be the right back. Make it make sense, Alex. Do you want to go on to formations now, or are we still talking about individual players? Because I've got the formation. Let's carry on with the individuals. Okay, should we move on to the next one? Okay, right, okay. Asay Samuel, yes, rapid and an out-and-out winger. I just wonder if he was forced to play right back in Turkey because there were better wingers in front of him, and that may not be the case at Blues. Kyogo, Do we have any more to say on Kyogo? Go on, your thoughts about him.
It's the different types of finishes that have impressed me from watching bits of his time at Celtic. Some have finesse, some are just absolutely fired into the roof of the net, into the corners, a little bit Jay Stansfield-esque at times. I really like it. He's 30. Yes, he's 30 years old. The only thing that does concern me with him and with Demarai Gray is the age profile.
Yeah.
He's 30 years old. Are his best years behind him? Did Celtic have his best years? That's always kind of a question, isn't it?
Well, Ryan McDonald said that to you, didn't he? I think he used exactly that phrase. He used the phrase, I think, that Celtic got the best out of Kyogo and then sold him for 10 million.
Yeah, and he's going to be 31 early next year. If he gets Blues to the Premier League by scoring 20 goals in the Championship, it's job done, isn't it? To be honest, I think it's a very short-term signing. But if he does the job, and there's always that risk, but if he does the job, then we'll look back on it in a year or two and say that was excellent. Blues can now, let him go for relatively cheap, or they can have him as a backup option in the Premier League. I think it's a very short-term signing, but again, it suggests that Blues are a team in a hurry that want proven players at this point in time and want to get to the Premier League quickly.
So I gushed about him at the start. Here are the two buts. There were three buts. One of them was what Ryan McDonald said about Celtic having had the best of him. What you're saying is hopefully there's enough of not quite the best that left to get Blues where they need to go. There's the shoulder injury and there's the Wren experience. Now, Wren was pretty chaotic, wasn't it? Jordan James also had the Wren experience, albeit he started off struggling to get into the side and ended in the side. Am I right in thinking that the manager who brought Kyogo in left fairly soon afterwards, like within days or something?
Yes. So they had Stefan Julian, who's now at QPR for the first part of the season. Then they had George Sampioli for the Argentine coach who'd been at Sevilla, and I think he's managed Chile, Argentina. He lasted, days, weeks. He was the guy who went mid-season. At the end of the season, I think, with Habib Bey. So again, very chaotic season for them. You can't really blame someone like Kyogo for not, thriving in that situation. He only started his first game and didn't start again. So, was it a one-off? Can you just throw that out the window and say, okay, the circumstances were so chaotic that we can understand why you didn't, produce your best form, and just put it aside and say, okay, here's the 3.5-year body of work of Celtic. And that was exceptional. He scored 85 goals in 165 games. There was one season where he scored 34 goals. I'd probably rather. It's the romantic in me that wants to think Blues are getting that Kyogo rather than the one of the last 6 months at Rennes. But we won't know really until he starts playing, will we?
No, and there is the shoulder injury, which I think Ryan said is managed at the moment rather than anything overly concerning. If a shoulder does come out, properly, and it needs an operation to sort it all out again, it's a 2 or 3 month exercise. I think back to when Paul Caddis, and it certainly cost him months rather than weeks. But I hope maybe I'm catastrophizing here, and it's not that situation.
Well, that's the thing. I think he's played with it for a few years now. So,
right.
And I'm looking at his numbers in terms of games played per season. I think his minimum was like 40 games over the last 4 years.
Yeah. Okay.
So he's still getting through all the games. Apparently, it popped out a few times in a season at Celtic, and it could lead to him missing a couple of games here and there. But it doesn't seem to be a serious issue. He's 30, 31 early next year. Is he probably going to try and get to the end of his career before having an operation that rules him out for 3 or 4 months? Maybe. I don't know, but. You'd presume he's not going to have it imminently, because I don't think Blues would have shelled out for a player who's then going to come in and miss the first 3-4 months of the season.
Yeah, and he would have had a medical, absolutely.
Exactly.
Let's turn the gush back on the movement. Just watching those Celtic highlight reels, the movement in the penalty area is something else, and there's a lot of one-touch finishes in there as well, and sometimes the movement is standing still and letting everything else change around them. I suppose you would say defensively, some of the defences he was going up against, and some of the space he was either being given or found was, he's not going to get that in the Championship. But the movement and the cleverness and the one-touch finishing were what stood out. Okay, have we devoted enough of this episode to Kyogo Furuhashi?
I think so, considering we've already done a Kyogo special as well.
Yeah, okay. So the last one through the door so far, Kanya Fujimoto, free signing from Gil Vicente in Portugal. Thoughts about that one?
Yeah, again, this was one that's really been on our radar from the start of summer, hasn't it? Pretty much from the end of last season. So I think it was always quite clear that he was going to join Blues. It was just kind of they wanted assurances over a knee injury that he picked up at the end of last season. So obviously they've got those assurances. I quite like it. I watched a bit of his football last season. His numbers are good: 5 goals, 5 assists in 30 league games. That is a good league. For me, that's not a Dutch league. It's a stronger league than the Dutch league. You've got 3 or 4 teams in that league that are very good and that compete in the Champions League and do quite well on occasions in the Champions League, in Benfica, Porto and Sporting. So he's quite highly rated over there, talked up as a player who is a very good number 10, finds pockets of space, uses the ball really well. You watch some of his goals, he's really, really, really technically proficient. His use of the ball in terms of when he can, get into that kind of number 10 hole and thread a pass through is really, really good. I'd imagine Kyogo is going to love playing with him. I'd imagine Jay Stansfield is going to love playing with him, players who make those runs and need that creative number 10 to find them. So I really like it. We know that Chris Davies, based on last season's system, loves a left-footed number 10, either playing in that 10 position from the start or drifting in from the right. I think Kyogo can do that. I think Fujimoto can do both of those things. I think he could also, if we're going to go into formations in a bit, I think he could also probably play as an advanced number 8 in a 4-3-3 system. So it gives Blues a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of craft, as Chris Davies will probably put it, a similar sign to Kieran Doyle in January. Just looks an interesting player. Again, with him, because he hasn't been in England before, or hasn't been in the UK before like Kyogo has, it's can he adapt to this style of football where it's going to be a lot more physical than it was in Portugal.
Yeah, indeed. So just looking at his record, he played mostly as a 10 last season. I think he has been brought in as a 10. He is not exclusively left-footed, but pretty left-footed, as you say. He's played 44 matches as a right winger as well. So, maybe there's something in that Blues have spotted. With your number 10, you measure your 10s in terms of goal contributions, don't you? And 10 from 30 games last season is very good. His interview, he said he described himself as a playmaker and someone who connects the back to the front, which I think obviously works brilliantly well for what Blues do, trying to play through the thirds. And also, I know for a fact that the Blues their eye was caught by his work out of possession as well. He's not a number 10 that loses possession, gives up and floats around. He's tracked back, and there are quite a few clips of him, sort of sneaking in on the blind side and picking pockets of midfielders to set the team away. So, yeah, I mean, I wonder if he is coming in and has been earmarked as a first choice 10. I mean, there's so many options there now, aren't there? There's obviously Willemsen, GA potentially. When we will eventually start talking formations, we may start moving Jay around into that second striker 10 position as well. Yeah, I don't know. It's not clear in my mind yet whether he's been brought in to start as the 10 or whether he's depth or an option. I mean, that will be decided in pre-season, won't it?
Yeah, and also probably decided by the quality of options that come in from now until the start of the season. So
yeah,
we know that Blues have liked Kieran Down, and if he was to come in, for example, similar player, similar profile, does he have the edge because he's played 6 months under Chris Davies already? Does Willemsen, again, similar profile of player, probably doesn't do the work back as effectively as a Fujimoto, but does he have the starting chance because he's already had a year under Chris Davies and knows the methods? And he's a very interesting one because we were very disappointed with him at the end of last season, in the final 6 months of last season. But does the additional quality coming in help him? Does it bring a new level out of him? Because we know there's clearly a really, really high ceiling, a lot of talent there, but we just probably didn't see it for the final 6 months of last season, it almost seemed, as we said a million times, like completed League One first half of the season, then just kind of tailed off a little bit.
Wouldn't surprise me if Blues try and get some money back on Williamson at all this summer. So, of the 7 we've talked about, in terms of starters, you're looking, we think, probably Beedle. Neumann, pretty much definitely, yeah?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Gray, definitely, I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Kyogo, definitely.
Yeah.
Which leaves Doyle, Asai, Samuel, and Fujimoto. Any of those you're handing a starting shirt to straight away?
It's difficult to look at. Less so Fujimoto, because he's coming into a new country, and Chris Davies could quite easily turn around and say we need to give him time to settle. He needs to be kind of drip fed into the team. Yeah. But a little bit like Koji Miyoshi was in his first championship season, I don't think John Eustace would have used him so early had it not been for injuries. So with the other two, with Doyle and Asai Samuel, they've played a lot of football in the championship already, haven't they? They're ready to go. They're both good players. Doyle has played Premier League last 2 years. Asai Samuel, European football, international with Nigeria. I find it hard to believe those two aren't joining Blues to play. Yeah. But then again, I look at who's in their positions, and I find it hard to think they're going to sit on the bench. So it really is an embarrassment of riches at the moment. Maybe there is something we don't know at the moment, that somebody could still leave or be going somewhere else. That is always a possibility in the transfer window, isn't it? But I just think those two in particular, like the other 4 we mentioned, I find it hard to believe they're not going to be in the 11.
Yeah, Asai Samuel, for me, I don't see that there's a right winger that knocks Asai Samuel. Keeps Asai Samuel, a guy that's played in the Europa League last season, played Champions League football, played under Jose Mourinho, keeps him on the bench. There's not that player in Blue squad, but that would potentially mean him playing as a winger rather than as a right back, because I do think it would be quite a contest with Ethan Laird. Right, let's do it, Alex. Make it all fit into last season's 4-2-3-1 with the rider that, yes, we know it wasn't really a 4-2-3-1 when the ball eventually was finally kicked off. It changed massively. Go on then. Pick your team in the 4-2-3-1 formation. Okay, so
obviously Beedle in goal. Your right back is Laird, as things are. I think Neumann's going to be your right-sided centre back at the moment. I think Clara is your left centre back, and Alex Cochrane's your left back. So obviously in possession that becomes a back 3. So Cochrane on the left with his left foot, Clara in the middle, because I think Blues will be quite keen going into the championship to avoid him being isolated out wide, as he was at times last season when he was playing as a right-side centre back. Yeah. So Neumann's physicality should dissolve that weakness. So midfield 2, Tomoki Iwata and Sung Ho Peck. Doyle's going to get in at some point. We know he is, but at the moment those two, which is why I said Doyle and Asai Samuel are 2 I can't quite put into my 11 as things stand. Again, we're probably going to see something different over pre-season. I think your right-footed, your right winger, who is essentially in this system a number 10 who plays out wide, I think is Kanya Fujimoto. Right. I think he is.
With Ethan Laird being the width.
With Ethan Laird being the width again, yeah. And then I think then you've got another 10, which is either Stansfield or Kyogo. I think it's probably going to be Kyogo off Stansfield. And then your left winger is Demarai Gray. That's how I look at it at the moment. That's what I think I would say is the most obvious 11. All the pieces fit there for me. If I start bringing other people into the 11, things aren't going to fit so comfortably.
Why do you hate Tommy Doyle?
Well, I don't hate Tommy Doyle. I'd happily put him as one of my number 10s, but I just think you've got to kind of shoehorn Kyogo and Stansfield into the same 11. I think that is the only way to currently do it, and also to get Gray, because you can stick Stansfield out wide, but he is not the natural fit in this system. No. Demarai Gray and Keshi Anderson are also. Yeah,
indeed. It's really difficult. I was writing it down and I was thinking, but what about Jay? What about Jay? Jay's the Knighthead poster boy, isn't he? He was the keynote signing of last season. And suddenly you're thinking, how are we getting Jay Stansfield into this team? Just to be clear, you are playing Kyogo in front of Stansfield, are you? Mostly.
I think there will be a lot of flexibility there because both can play 9, both can play 10. An interesting point that Ryan McDonald made in that previous podcast about Kyogo was that Ange Postecoglou used Kyogo as a centre forward. He used him, looking at it, he used him as centre forward in a 4-3-3 formation with 2 high wingers and 2 high number 8 as well. So we know Ange Postecoglou, very attacking, very similar to Celtic. Kyogo is having chances created left, right and centre. No wonder he ended up with 34 goals season. Just said that like anyone could do it. But Brendan Rodgers instead made Kyogo play a little deeper, so he was more of a 10 under Rodgers. And it looks like on the face of it that it contributed to Kyogo not scoring as many goals. I still think he did score a good amount. You know, he wasn't like, never scoring, but he didn't score as many goals. So Ryan McDonald thought that he wasn't as effective when he was a 10, but still he was effective enough to have good nights in Champions League matches and so on. So I think that's an option. We know Stansfield can also play as a 10. Some of Stansfield's best football in that Blues Championship season, the first one, was when he was playing as a 10.
Yeah.
Had Blues had the striker that season, Stansfield would have played as a 10 a lot more, I think. They just didn't have a striker who was capable of scoring goals, so he had to play there. That could be an option this season. That would also take the pressure off Stansfield a little bit. Rather than being the number 9 who's expected to go and score 20 goals, he could play as one of 2 10s/9s along with Kyogo. They could split the goals. I think that's a very, very obvious idea and solution to both of it. They can both play both positions, so why not let them interchange? And I think Chris Davies is a manager who likes a lot of flexibility, particularly going forward. So I reckon that's probably an option.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight you on. I'm going to do the 4-2-3-1 as well. I'm not going to fight you at all on the goalkeeper and back 4, Laird, Neumann, Clara, Cochrane, Peckin Iwata. I'm not going to fight you on that either. I just don't see how. Even with Tommy Doyle, I don't see how you don't start the season with those 2. They are almost they're the engine room that makes it work, aren't they? I think Asai Samuel might start as the right winger, Demarai as the left, Kyogo up front, and then you're left with Stansfield, Fujimoto, and maybe Doyle as the 10. We've probably risked going around in circles if we talk about the various merits of which one should play 10. I'll just go back to what I'm saying about trying to get Jay into the side in a position that works for him as well. And I think I want Kyogo in the penalty area, judging from what I've seen of his highlights. Never in the flesh. The movement and the finishing for me, just a little bit better than Jay's at this point of his career.
Yeah, sorry, Brian. The Bright Asai Samuel thing's very interesting because Chris Davies has been given loads of tools now, hasn't he? So, if you play at home against 90% of Championship teams, I would expect, given the way Blues play, for them to have loads of the ball. And if you're dominating the ball, you can afford to play the system they had last season. They can have potentially Kyogo Fujimoto drifting in from the right-hand side and becoming that number 10, like I mentioned. But if they play away somewhere against a Leicester City 4 games in, and they're not going to have all the ball against Leicester City. Leicester City have got excellent midfielders themselves. They're going to try and dominate the ball. Maybe Blues will need to, yes, when they've got it, play their own way, but also have a little bit more tactical flexibility and be a little bit more counter-attack based. And you're not really losing a great deal of technical quality by playing Bright Asai Samuel as your right winger, are you? But you're also gaining an absolutely exceptional ball carrier. So if you've got him and Demarai Gray on either flank, then you've got 2 flyers, haven't you? You can get you the field quickly. So I just think, looking at it now, they'll need probably 2 or 3 more players. But looking at it now, there's so many options for Chris Davies to choose from. It feels like they're ticking pretty much every box.
Yeah, and absolutely. Just going back to the Kyogo and Stansfield debate, they can manage minutes now in a way that they don't need to flog one of them to death particularly. Interesting you mentioned Leicester City in that scenario where Blues aren't going to have as much as the ball. I think it was only a couple of games in League One where they had less of the ball. Was there even 2?
You've put me on the spot there, Brian.
Was there even 1 where Blues didn't have as much of the ball?
I feel like the only one I can recall from last season was it Blackpool in the FA Cup where they had less of the ball?
Was it? Right, okay.
I'm sure there was one.
So the point I'm making is that is going to be probably more frequent. Let's say it's more frequent than once. It's not, hot takes are us here. Yeah. So in that situation where Blues have less of the ball, and you've rightly pointed to, the trip to Leicester, I wonder if we are now looking at the next formation, which is the 4-3-3, which is where Tommy Doyle suddenly comes into play. Do Blues go to Leicester or somewhere like that, Southampton say, sit a little bit deeper, have the pace in the attacking positions, in the attacking three, and combine Peck, Iwata and Doyle? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you could, couldn't you? So you've got the three-man midfield, which is obviously going to be in a 4-3-3. You could change to more of a flat back four. Yes, you still give your fullbacks license to go on, but you've also got an extra midfielder in there. So, Tommy Doyle could quite easily sit in alongside of Iwata and give those two centre-backs more protection to create the box. And then you allow your fullbacks that little bit of freedom. You could play a 4-3-3 with, two really high wingers, and that would again really suit Demarai Gray, but also would suit Bright Samuel if he played in that position as a right sider. So Jay Stansfield could play on the left in that situation quite easily. If he didn't need to track back and defend as much, you wouldn't lose that much of his quality going forward. I like that formation as well. I think it would really, really suit Blues with the players they've got, the personnel they've got. Again, they've got so many options that this is now a contender.
It would surprise me, I've got to say, if they detach or they moved from what we perceive to be the set formation into a different set formation. But formations are for you and me, really, aren't they? They're not really for what happens on the way Chris Davies' football teams play, are they?
No, exactly. I mean, players just end up in certain positions, and it's by design, not by mistake. So, I would be stunned if Chris Davies has spent a year building a team in League One, knowing that they're building for the Championship, to then get to the Championship and change things. I think they've signed players to fit the system, not signed players to change the system. Yeah,
okay, fair dues. I think they've signed players to give them options, though. This is what this discussion is starting to feel like in terms of systems. So let's. Do you want to pick a 4-3-3, or should we move on?
Pick a 4. I think I kind of mentioned mine, but yeah, I mean, it'd be quite easy. Beedle, Laird, Neumann, Clara, Cochrane. Your three midfielders are obvious. Iwata at the base, Doyle and Peck either side. Your left wingers, Gray. Your right wingers, probably. I'm going to say Asai Samuel because I just think he would fit it well. And then your striker is Kyogo or Stansfield. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Which I think you've probably killed this one dead in the water, but the final kind of idea I want to kick around is the three at the back. Somebody on Twitter, X, mentioned it to me the other day about could Blues be preparing or laying the groundwork to play with three at the back ever? Let's sort of gloss over the suggestion that they did play a three at the back anyway, because they sent the one of the fullbacks so far forward they were defending with three. Does a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, does that work now?
I would be very, very surprised. I think managers still look at a back three or starting with a back three as quite defensive.
Yeah.
I think they still do. I remember Gareth Southgate trying to transition from a back three to a back four after, was it the Euro 21? Saying that, all the top teams, top international sides play with the back four because they want to keep the ball. This formation isn't necessarily that suited to keeping the ball. So I'd be surprised if Blues went for that. I think that probably sticks their 4-2-3-1 or a variation of it with different players. But
just come in there, inevitably, a back three, or certainly in Blues past, a back three has been because you haven't had two centre-backs that you've been completely comfortable with. Presumably that's not going to be the case with Clara and Neumann, is it?
No, absolutely not. With Clara and Beedle, or if they get Ben Davies back, it won't be the case there because he was excellent as a defensive pairing with Clara last year. So, you sign players like Neumann with those kind of that athletic profile to ensure you can play with two centre backs, don't you? Because you need one who's athletic, who can defend 1v1, so you can attack more. So I'd be stunned if it led to Blues changing shape.
Yeah, you said you'd be stunned if Blues went from a 2-3-1 into a 4-3-3. I think we'd both be comatose if they lined up with 3 centre backs and at the start of the season, wouldn't we? On this one, I suppose. Does it work? Before we move on, it allows you to play Jay and Kyogo up front.
The left backs aren't, though, are they, Brian? The left backs aren't wing backs.
No, they're not. No, Cochrane's not a wing back. You're then trying to say, can Laird or I say Samuel be a left wing back? And that's not really what we're trying to achieve here. Should we kick that one into the long grass for now?
Q Blue Star against Sevilla Saturday night, the 3-5-2.
Absolutely, yeah. Right. I think that's everything on the running order. Is there anything else you want to go for?
We could probably just quickly knock around kind of other positions that we still think they need to strengthen.
Yeah, go on then. What's the answer to that question?
I think we're working on the assumption of around 8, weren't we, after Neumann? So they've had 6 since then. So they're probably, if there's going to be more than that, they'll need to get rid of players, or certain players will leave that are part of the picture as we see it. I think a new centre-back is obvious. They need a new centre-back. It's probably I'd say it's a hard sell, but it's not really, is it? Because if you sign a left-footed centre-back, he'll know he's the only left-footed centre-back in the squad. And that, in this day and age, gives you a certain advantage, doesn't it? So Ben Davies would be ideal. He's got an injury at Rangers and hasn't played in pre-season for them. So that's, again, delaying it because Russell Martin will still want to take a look at him when he's fit. So that just makes it awkward. They're going to need probably another 10/right winger for me. I'm not saying Fujimoto, Willemsen type, because they've now got 2 of that type, but I still think there's scope for a player in that position.
Do you really? You've got your out and out right winger with Samuel, and then you've got 2 options as a 10 type.
I think you need another 10.
Right side.
I do think you need one more. That's just me personally. I think left back's the probably obvious one because they've only got Cochrane fit at the moment. But with Asai Samuel, who says he can play at left back, with Laird, we know Laird at times last season did play not as a left back, but as a right back inverted to join the defensive 3 as a when they flipped the system and allowed Cochrane to go forward. So he can play as a more defensive reserve player as well. It doesn't feel like an absolute necessity to me unless Buchanan is going to be out longer term. But I think we need to get a picture of when Buchanan timeline of when he's going to be back to get a better understanding of that, to be honest.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. We've gone through an entire podcast kicking around all sorts of formation ideas, and we've not mentioned Alfie Gray or Lyndon Dykes once. Blues now have four strikers, don't they? Which I think back to Steve Bruce's old adage is you're only as good as your strikers, and the better teams have 4 fairly interchangeable ones. So if ever there is an example of the depth has really improved here, it is up front.
Yeah, because Alfie May was. Chris Davies made the point after the Blackpool game last season. Alfie May was signed to score goals in League One. And he's done that.
Yeah.
So they've given him a 3-year contract. The final 2 years of that, I dare say Alfie May is not going to play loads of football for Blues, but I think on him now, it's down to him to prove in pre-season that he can be an effective substitute, because there will be tight games next season where kind of those predatory instincts might actually come in handy. And if he can step off the bench and do something inside the box, then again, he's probably giving Blues a benefit that they maybe wouldn't have expected because he was signed for that League One season. So Dykes, again, real question mark over him because of how he performed in League One, or at least he's returning League One. I quite liked him as a number 10 at points last season. I don't think he'll get the chance to play that position in the Championship. I think he'll be looked at as a big physical striker who's got to kind of start throwing his weight around and being that player to give them a very different option to the other 3 strikers. If he can do that, then I could see him sticking around. If he can't, then it wouldn't surprise me to try to sign someone else to do it.
Brilliant. Let's wrap it up there. Alex, thank you very much for your time. Thanks everyone for your interest. Hopefully you found us kicking around formation soup reasonably interesting. Be great if you could give us your thoughts about who plays where and how often. Leave it in the comment section. Hit like or subscribe, and it's a big keep right on from both of us.